Hello and welcome to today's Manhattan Project program of the LaRouche organization for Saturday, July 29th. Manhattan Project is now suddenly taking on a different meaning for people now that the Oppenheimer movie has premiered and many people have begun to see it and talk about the contents of it. But the movie and people's discussions are occurring in a rather interesting context, although on the one hand there certainly is the great danger of war that we see, and in fact a far greater danger than people wish to recognize and in many cases wish to in any way discuss. Certainly the world is now undergoing what could be characterized as a rapid succession of developments, and their direction may be ushering in the greatest change in human history since the 15th century. That change may very well be a positive change. It's really going to be up to us as to how that will occur. What basically tends to happen in the case of the American people particularly is that they have been removed from the dialogue about that change and the dialogue involving that change, except as the rubber stamp for oligarchical policies adopted by people that claim to be freedom-loving and democratic and so on, but in fact work against the interests of the American people as they do against the interests of people all over the world. What we are going to do today is to discuss something that is not discussed at all in the so-called Western media. And that involves the summit conference that's been happening in St. Petersburg, which is convened by Russia and by Vladimir Putin, attended by over 20 heads of state from various of the African nations and many other organizations besides. This summit conference has had several discussions. It's had so many different meetings. It's almost impossible to recount them. But what we're going to do is to play for you a short discussion that Helga LaRouche, the chairman and the founder of the Schiller Institute, had with Harley Schlanger about this development and its context a couple of days ago.
On this question of a new paradigm we have from a regular correspondent, wanted to know your thoughts on the progress towards both the BRICS summit, but also the ongoing Russia-Africa forum taking place in St. Petersburg.
Well, the tension around both the BRICS summit, which comes up in late August, and also the ongoing Africa-Russia summit in St. Petersburg, the tension around that is really high. Because, for example, the German, I don't even remember what her post is, it's so irrelevant, German Minister of Environment, I think she is, I may be mistaken. She said, this summit in St. Petersburg, this is just a PR event for Putin. Now, how arrogant can you be? I mean, here are, admittedly, at the last Russia-Africa summit a couple of years ago, there were 43 heads of state. This time it's only 21 heads of state, but 17 vice presidents or foreign ministers and then 5 ambassadors. Why? Because the United States and the Europeans have been running around in Africa making maximum pressure on these countries, threatening them, offering things, telling them not to go with, at least not with the level of heads of state, to the summit in St. Petersburg. And given the fact that many African countries are not exactly in the, they have economic problems, they have difficulties, so they're not all in a position to counter these pressures. Nevertheless, it is an incredible event, and first of all, it makes very clear that Putin is everything but isolated, because as we know from many discussions with African countries, they regard Russia as a friend, they regard China as a friend, and, it's a completely different relationship these African countries have with Russia and China than they have with the Europeans or the United States. So, but what this reflects is I would say, rather desperate move, in the last moment to prevent this new coalition from coming into being. But I don't think they will succeed at all, because what Russia is offering is real economic development, real technology like nuclear technology. China, for that matter, is offering all kinds of infrastructure projects and railroads and industrial parks. And, so I think that the West should reform. They should really abandon this idea that their way is the only way or the highway, my way or the highway. That attitude is really a matter of the past and should stop.
Now, there's a question about the emergence of a new economic and development architecture. Someone asks about, with the BRICS summit coming up, are the BRICS countries adopting the kind of credit-based system that you and your late husband had proposed, as well as banking regulation? And if they haven't, shouldn't they do so?
Well, I think they are in the process of doing exactly that. I think that the fact that, for example, Dilma Rousseff, the new head of the New Development Bank, the former Prime Minister President of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, is participating in the St. Petersburg meeting, I think is very important. And there are many other signs and statements by people who are involved in putting such a new economic system and a new currency together. I think they are absolutely doing it. However, obviously, this is not something you do overnight. You have to consider a lot of factors, like the different level of economic development, the different means of production. What is the creditworthiness of each country in terms of productive powers? All of that has to be calculated and put into a very clear, balanced system. But I think this is going on, and that may turn out to be the anchor of salvation for the Western financial system, because we are going into a huge financial crisis. There is no question about it. But what will count then is physical assets. And those countries who have invested in physical assets, in infrastructure, in, production capacity, they will be the better ones off. And those who have put their entire fortune on betting on, financial gains and maximization of profits, that may all go out of the chimney, because, the derivative bubble, which goes anywhere in the direction of 2 quadrillion outstanding derivative debt, there is no way how this can ever be paid. So, we are heading towards a financial crash. And, the more quickly the countries of the West would say, let's reorganize this bankrupt system, let's introduce Glass-Steagall banking separation, bring our economies in order, go back into the direction of investment in physical economy, and then join with the global South countries, that would be the way out. But it would require to come down from the high horse.
On that topic, there's just been published on one of the BRICS newsletters a memo written by two of our colleagues, Dennis Small and Mary Jane Freeman, on precisely this issue of the kind of economic reforms and transformations that are necessary for the development perspective that you and your husband have been the champion of for so many years. That should be available on our website or in the next issue of the Executive Intelligence Review.
So what you've just been given is the actual perspective of where the world needs to go, as opposed to annihilating itself in thermonuclear war. And to that end, what's going to happen in New York City and also around the world next on Sunday, August the 6th, the 78th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, Japan, during the Second World War, is a rally called Humanity for Peace. What we're going to do today is to devote the whole program basically to a discussion about that rally, why it's happening, and we're going to be hearing from two of the main organizers of the rally in just a few minutes. Now, Helga Zepp-LaRouche, as we've often said, and for people that may have just tuned in and seen what we were playing, that was Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the chairman and founder of the Schiller Institute organization. She's being interviewed there by Harley Schlanger. Her organization, which was started back in 1984, and based itself on the poet Friedrich Schiller. Friedrich Schiller, who is best known in Western society generally as having been the author of the poem Ode to Joy, which then was set by Beethoven to the famous Ninth Symphony. That is not the beginning and ending of Schiller's importance. In fact, as a philosophical thinker, he was one of the most important thinkers of all of world history, and he specifically in an area called the aesthetic education of the emotions. He also was an historian, and his Science of Universal History was sort of the basis of Helga Zepp LaRouche's formulation of what she called her 10 principles for a new security and development architecture. This was something that has been being organized around ever since last year. And in various ways, the idea that Helga had was to create a set of dialogues among people around the world that could allow humanity as a whole to come to a new form of self-understanding. This didn't mean new forms of government necessarily, but it did mean a new rational set of human relations in which the benefit of each nation and the people of each nation is taken into account by the other. So this outlook is to establish a just community of principle among the world's nations. Now, this would seem to a lot of people to be almost an impossible task to free the United States, for example, from the grip of the treasonous forces that have dominated all aspects of its foreign, military, and economic policy for decades. But the idea is that what we need to give people are new conceptual tools. You don't need new parties, simply new factions, a lot more money coming from Elon Musk or something like that. That's all the things that people normally start with. But actually, the idea is what's in your head? What are you starting with? And what we're going to do is offer some remarks that were penned by Lyndon LaRouche back in 40 years ago exactly, in a document that he wrote called Saudi Arabia in the year 2023, and he was just reflecting on the United States. He said the following: why did the United States ever follow a different policy than economic development of its neighbors and of itself, as it had been pursuing for the first couple of hundred of years of its growth? And he says this, LaRouche, in his May 10th, 1982 public address at London's Chatham House, Henry Kissinger stated accurately that the death of President Franklin Roosevelt in 1945 enabled Prime Minister Winston Churchill to dictate the post-war foreign policy of the United States. That every U.S. Secretary of State after Roosevelt's death had been, in effect, an agent of influence for the British Foreign Office. Only President Eisenhower, and he only in exceptional cases, ever dared to challenge the British-controlled U.S. State Department during the post-war period to date. We're talking about the period between 1945 and then into the Eisenhower administrations of 1952 and 1956. No president since Roosevelt has ever found the courage to challenge the United States Federal Reserve System or the complex of foreign, private, rentier financier interests which have controlled the Federal Reserve System since its original establishment under the puppet president Woodrow Wilson. Thus, the most vital of the objective interests of the United States and the monetary and foreign policies of that government have been frequently directly opposed to one another. Similar conditions have prevailed during most of the post-war period among the nations of continental Western Europe. Now, just to fill out what Lyndon LaRouche is talking about, you'll notice at the beginning of that statement, he talked about a speech that Kissinger had given back in 1982. And here's a quote from that speech and the speech that he gave a day later. The first quote actually is from a speech from the day later. And he said this: Britain has rarely proclaimed moral absolutes or rested her faith in the ultimate efficiency of technology, despite her achievements in this field. Philosophically, Britain remains Hobbesian. She expects the worst and is rarely disappointed. In moral matters, Britain has traditionally practiced a convenient form of ethical egoism, believing that what was good for Britain was best for the rest. And that's the kind of thing that Helga was talking about the arrogance of what's called the West. But really what this is an adaptation of the airs of British imperialism being used by the Continentals, the colonials of the United States. And that's what you're hearing when you hear a Tony Blinken, or you hear these other characters, Samantha Power, Victoria Nuland, you know, you can just go on and on, Susan Rice, you name any number of them. But specifically, what Linda LaRouche was referring to was a quote from Henry Kissinger from May 10th, and it was in a speech that was called Reflections on a Partnership, British and American Attitudes to Post-War Foreign Policy. This is what he said. The British were so matter-of-factly helpful that they became a participant in internal American deliberations to a degree probably never practiced between sovereign nations. In my period in office, the British played a seminal part in certain American bilateral negotiations with the Soviet Union. Indeed, they helped draft the key document. In my White House incarnation then, so he's talking about the period of the 1970s. He was in Secretary of State position from about 1969 through the Ford administration, for that matter, after Nixon resigned, and even subsequently. So he says, in my White House incarnation then, I kept the British Foreign Office better informed and more closely engaged than I did the American State Department. Okay, now, the reason to take that, to quote that, is some people are aware that Henry Kissinger recently, at the age of 100, went to China and he had a meeting with Xi Jinping of China. And the photo sort of says a lot, because you have to consider that the Kissinger, whose quotes I just read you, that was from 41 years ago. And if you look at this picture, you're seeing something else. Contrast, for example, the present trajectory of the United States economy and the economy of China. Not the financial system of the United States or the financial system of China, not the dollar valuation of the United States or the dollar valuation of China. No, the state of the urban centers, their respective industrial output, their respective industrial capacity, the state of their workforces, and the trajectory of these. And if you look at that, you got a picture of what you could call sunrise and sunset. Now, we're going to compare this image of Kissinger with that of Kissinger in 1972, when he was 49 years old, speaking with the 75-year-old Mao Zedong. The same age difference in this picture is the age difference that you just saw between Kissinger and Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is about 70 years old. Henry Kissinger is 100. Now, compare this and compare the China of that time to the China of today. Compare the United States of that time to the United States of today. Compare the relative positions of the two countries. Now, the question is, were the fortunes of these two nations, if you want to call them the fortunes, the destinies, not shaped by human beings? Was there some nefarious extraplanetary force that made inevitable what occurred? Were there external political forces who sometimes have that with the Marxists, who believe in things like dialectical materialism or historical materialism, who talk about the notion of forces of history? Were those at work in this situation? And we would say no, that basically those things involve a departure. What's actually at work is something different. And it's something that came, unfortunately, into focus in the last couple of days in the United States, primarily in the Senate. The journalist Glenn Greenwald did a spot on this because he thought it was very important to call attention to it. And we're going to play a section of that and make a comment concerning why this rally that's about to occur in New York and the organizing around the rally is bringing about a new form of dialogue in the world among political forces, rather than that old dialogue you saw there with Henry Kissinger and Xi Jinping, Henry Kissinger and Mao Zedong. There's no change from the American perspective or the Anglo-American perspective. There's no change in their orientation. So there's a different China there, but there's no change in the imperial orientation. Why is that? So Glenn Greenwald's spot partially addressed this, and I think it was done relatively tastefully. We're going to show a section of that now.
So earlier today, just to conclude the show with a somewhat quick but I think important point about the nature of the American ruling class, Mitch McConnell gave a press conference in the rotunda of the Capitol where, as soon as he began, he was quite visibly shaken and incapable of maintaining any kind of focus, and very quickly after that, he became utterly incapacitated, basically incapable of speaking, inexplicably froze, and was very disoriented as his colleagues realized what was happening and tried to get him off the podium and get him to some help. Let me show you first what happened. It is a somewhat disturbing scene. There's no enjoyment that anyone should derive from watching somebody suffer in this way.
And a string of
Wait a minute. Are you good?
Okay, Mitch? Anything else you want to say? Or should we just go back to your press? Do you want to say anything else to the press?
Go back. Go ahead, John.
I'll take it. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
So that was disturbing. That was alarming. I don't want to speculate at all about what might have happened there. There's, from what I've seen right before we went on air, no reports about his medical condition. We obviously hope he's fine. But look, Mitch McConnell, if it seems like he's been around forever, it's because he has been. He was first elected to the Senate in 1985. He was actually elected as part of the election that re-elected President Reagan. So basically, he ran for the Senate for the first time in the first term of Ronald Reagan's administration. He has been re-elected 7 times since. He is now in his 7th term in the Senate. And he has been the leader of the Republican caucus in the Senate, both as majority and minority leader, for many, many years now. And these scenes are becoming increasingly common because the American ruling class is getting older and older and older, and they simply refuse to retire. I have told this story many years ago as part of the Snowden reporting. When I was first contacted by Edward Snowden, he obviously didn't want to use his real name. He was concerned, for good reason, obviously, about the surveillance state in which he knew we were living, but not very many other people did. And the pseudonym that he used to contact me was Cincinnatus, who is a renowned leader of the Roman Empire from the 4th century BC. And he was essentially renowned because he had been in power, decided he wanted to retire from public life. He was getting older. He didn't want to keep working. He believed a healthy society has a constant refreshing of people who are in power. And so he went to his farm, intended to live out the rest of his life in his farm, and Rome ended up in a war, and the Roman elite and Roman citizenry called on him to return, needing his leadership, and he did. He went back to leadership because they called on him, they urged him to do so. He won the war, he became incredibly popular, could have stayed in power forever, and instead he immediately announced, as he promised to do, that when the war was over he was going back to his farm. He gave up his position and never again returned to power. And Snowden chose that pseudonym because he so admired this idea that people actually go into public service sometimes with the intention of actually helping other people, helping the society be well governed.
Now, a problem has been posed by what Glenn Greenwald just said, but we think we have a solution. You have to obviously have a transition in a society from an older generation of leadership to another one. But what happens when the older generation of leadership is utterly, thoroughly degenerate? You have to find a way to do something more elegant. And in the situation we're in the United States today, you certainly cannot find a solution in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. You also can't really find a solution in a third party at the moment, because there's no third party that will likely or could likely take the power of the presidency. It may be the case that a third party might get elected in some area of the country, or maybe a state legislative position or something like that. And clearly, given the crisis that the country faces, something has to be done right away. Well, if the solution is not in the parties or in an alternate party, where is it? The solution, we believe, lies in opening up immediately a dialogue on the most fundamental questions confronting the human race between the youngest people in our nation and those who are older, who are still morally competent to attempt to come by some semblance of leadership and present policy to the American people upon which they can deliberate, and despite whatever disagreements we may have, to reach a human solution and a human approach. So there was an example of this earlier this week, and this was an exchange that occurred between Kynan Thistlethwaite, an organizer with the LaRouche organization, and also, as he's about to say, the International Peace Coalition, and RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, as everybody knows, is a presidential candidate, not very much appreciated by the Democratic Party, but nonetheless, he seems to believe, and we think he's correct, that he has not only every right, but he has actually a moral responsibility to put himself forward as a potential candidate for president of the United States. We're going to play that for you now.
Hi. Go ahead, please. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Kennedy. My question is on the topic of nuclear war, which you've addressed very well in your commencement address, which I think was one of the most important speeches given by a candidate. I'm personally an organizer for an organization called the International Peace Coalition. We've been organizing peace organizations across the world to really unite against this threat of nuclear war, you know? And we really have to bridge the gap, you know, as you said, because it no longer matters what our ideologies may be, what our particular beliefs are. Humanity is on the brink of annihilation, and we need to unite on that matter, no matter what.
We need a question, please.
I'm getting to it, thank you. But I want, because Kennedy, you talked about his American University speech, I think is probably one of the most important speeches. You know, we need a peace that's not for the grave, but a peace where all our families, everyone can cherish. And I want you to talk about that, and I really want you to endorse what we're doing with this peace coalition. And Helga LaRouche, she was the one who organized this.
We need a question, please.
She's calling for a durable security architecture among all the nations of the world. So I would like you to endorse that, and I'd like you to talk about the American University speech.
Well, first of all, I love what you said. Thank you for everything that you said.
Thank you.
And thank you for advocating for that, because it's so critical right now. I mean, we're in a potentially existential battle with Russia. I mean, the U.S. is now is effectively at war with Russia. It's a nuclear power, and they have 1,000 more nuclear weapons than we do. And nobody seems to be caring about this. So, you know, I love what you said. My uncle, in that speech, which I agree was one of the most important speeches in American history, he had negotiated secretly a nuclear test ban treaty with Khrushchev. My uncle and Khrushchev had developed this extraordinary friendship with each other where they could talk to each other on a hotline. their State Department, their intelligence apparatus all wanted to go to war, but both of them had been to war. And Khrushchev had been at Stalingrad. The last thing he wanted was to go to war. And he recognized that he was a partner with my uncle. They wrote each other 26 secret letters. The first one was smuggled to, we had a Soviet spy who used to visit our house when I was a little boy. His name is Georgy Bolshakov. And he was and we loved him. The kid, me and my 10 brothers and sisters, he would play with us. He would do Cossack dancing. He would climb ropes with my dad and do push-up contests. And he's a very charming guy. And it was cool for us because we knew he was a KGB spy and a GRU spy. And this was at a time when all the James Bond films were coming out, so it was cool having a spy in our house. My uncle Khrushchev knew he couldn't trust the people, his military apparatus, and my uncle knew that he couldn't trust his. They began corresponding with each other, hiding their letters in the New York Times, which Georgy Bolshakov would fly back and forth from Moscow and give them. And they devised a plan to create the first nuclear weapons treaty of the nuclear age, which was a nuclear test ban treaty. And when my uncle and they negotiated it secretly. They kept the State Department, the CIA out of it. And when they got the treaty, the U.S. sympathy for that treaty was 80-20 against it. And the military was in rebellion against my uncle. The Senate and House, even the Democrats were all against it. And that speech was the beginning of turning the tide. And what he said something extraordinary to the American people. Because we had all been raised with this idea that we had won the war. You know, it was America who beat Hitler. And, you know, we were watching shows like Vic Morrow and Combat on TV that showed Americans beating the Nazis and winning the war. And my uncle said, no, it was the Russians who won the war. The Russians, 1 out of every 7 Russians was killed. Hitler leveled a third of the country. He said, imagine if every city was reduced to rubble, every field burned, every forest burned between the East Coast and Chicago. That's what happened to Russia. And he said, we need to put ourselves into their shoes. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversary. And it was the first time Americans had heard that, and they started thinking differently about it. And that 2 months later, that treaty passed. And, you know, I think it's important to think of today because nobody has talked to Putin for a year. We have no high-level relationship with Russia. We need to be talking to them. We need to do what my uncle said, which is to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversaries.
Very quick. I just want, very quick.
Listen, we're well past 10. Wait, we're well past 10 o'clock. And
so that is the solution. That form of dialogue between the American people and the presidential candidates, for example, but also generational, cross-generational, obviously. But the idea is, how do you make it happen? Well, that's what we're here to discuss today. And we've got 3 people who we're going to bring up right now to do that. That is Anastasia Battle. And Anastasia, please raise your hand there to wave to us so that people see you. Thank you. Irene Mavrakakis. Irene, hello. And that must be Kynan. He's the last one left. So that's Kynan Thistlethwaite. What we want to talk about here is this rally, which is also a kind of mass intervention that you're talking about here called Humanity for Peace for August 6th. And the fact that it's sort of a worldwide operation. So Anastasia, I'm going to go to you first, and then maybe Irene, and then Kynan can add in. So start us off.
Yeah, I totally agree with that idea. This is a mass intervention on humanity right now. And I think it's an opportunity for people to reflect on just how insane the world has become at this point, And, you see everybody fighting amongst each other. There are all these gossip lines. People are nagging at one another. And I think what it really comes down to is that nobody sees any leadership. No one sees anybody taking any leadership within our governments to accomplish peace, to accomplish real peace. So what we've done, what Irene, myself, many of the other organizers, Rage Against the War Machine, the Schiller Institute, there's many organizations around the world who have joined who said, we're going to take on that responsibility. That's what we're going to do. We're going to represent what our governments should be doing. And what I'm getting reports from all sorts of people who are organizing their friends, their family, their neighbors, their groups, and just fighting with them like, hey, get over your ideologies. Who cares if that person, took your grant a year ago, or your lover, or you have some beef from 30 years ago? Who cares? What difference does it make if we're all dead in a nuclear war? Really? And what we're getting right now is that people are realizing that their love for humanity has to come first, above everything else. And as you can see, Irene can go through some of the different organizations in that process, but there's over 35 groups, I think 36 groups officially on the poster. We have more that are coming in by the day into our email with their logos to put on, endorsing the rally. We have tons of speakers now that, vary from every walk of life, from different religious groups, from different nations, presidential candidates, libertarians, liberals, peaceniks, whatever, what have you. And what's uniting us all right now is this love for mankind. And what I want to really impress upon you, the person who's watching this right now, is we need all hands on deck. We need everybody. This has to become a mass movement. We've got about 15 sister rallies. We can go through the list, of the different locations of where everything is. We have in Mexico, Guatemala, Sweden, the UK, Nicaragua, Malaysia, Germany, France, Romania, and more. Chile, I just heard Chile earlier today. Obviously in the United States at the United Nations, and then we have sister rallies across the country. So think about that. Think about the impact that this is going to have. All these people who are coming together around saving mankind from a nuclear war. And think about, we talk about this, we've talked about this with the LaRouche movement in the past, that what really inspires people is agape. What really is an important thought to express to people is agape. That means universal love. And what this rally is expressing is that love. So everyone, watching today, please get out and organize with us. There's flyers that you can print out. We need money. We're doing everything ad hoc on a shoestring budget. You can definitely donate. I'll include the donate button inside the group chat here on YouTube. And I'll see if I can find it wherever else you are on Rumble and Facebook as well. But just put everything you got into this fight right now. We don't have any time for people to argue over stupid nonsense. Let's just move forward and actually get this done. Let's actually save the world.
Thanks a lot. So Irene, I actually have one question, whatever else you're going to say. I like this Anastasia's emphasis on this, hey, everybody, forget it. Kind of said the same thing, actually, to RFK. Whatever the ideology, this, that, or the other is, hey, we have something bigger here. We're pulling together. It's called humanity. And just whatever else you are going to say, just wanted to reference that, because I think that's such an interesting, it's not just interesting, but it's an unusual approach.
Yeah, I agree. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine.
So I think the most important part of the rally and the coalition is for people to realize that the organizers and the endorsing organizations are from across the political spectrum. So a rally in itself doesn't actually do anything, is what many people will tell you, but it actually is something important that will do things moving forward if action occurs as a consequence. And the point of this coalition, this lefty, liberty, righty coalition, is that the people that are involved realize that the false narrative of divisive duopoly, Republicrat politics really is not what the world needs to be about. You know, even people in the Democratic Party don't agree on everything, and people in the Republican Party don't agree on everything. And people need to kind of break the bonds of those chains of the false duopoly that they think controls them, and realize that we're just trying to work together to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So once people realize that they're not a Republican or a Democrat, I'm a libertarian, but I'm not necessarily a libertarian. I'm a human. And once we realize that we just want food, water, shelter, purpose, community, and love, then we can stop playing this game. And we can refuse to allow the establishment to split us amongst party lines. And then we can elect legislators who also refuse to vote and behave along party lines. Our founding fathers warned about party and partisan politics. It's really not the way it's supposed to be. The people that get elected and go to the legislature are supposed to represent the people that elect them. And the people that we elect locally, statewide, and federally really can be of any party. They may have a preference of certain types of ideas, but they should represent the general interests of the people. And those people that we elect need to represent us worldwide, including preventing the concepts of us versus them being the purveying narrative that leads us to make decisions. So people need to stop looking at the world as good versus evil and us versus them, and realize that we're just one humanity trying to have purposeful lives. So the coalition represents a breaking of those chains of the duopoly, in my opinion. And we have realized that we have a lot more that unites us than what divides us. And the rally is just one day that represents the broader coalition that will continue to push forth.
Okay. Kynan, what kind of responses have you gotten since that intervention, that exchange with RFK? What other thoughts do you have about what people could do in the next 8 days to organize for the rally?
Yeah, I've gotten. You can hear me, right? First of all, okay. I've gotten quite a mix of responses, actually. I should mention, just to give context to the meeting, that the topic at hand was on Israel, Israeli-Palestinian relations, and there were a lot of people there, and including a Jewish for Peace group that was protesting the event because of RFK's positions on Israel and what I would call his disregard for some of the human rights abuses that have gone on there. So people had a different approach. People tackled him on that, and there were some responses, that maybe I should have gone harder on that. There were other people who really enjoyed it, that said I was able to break through, kind of the absurdity, the meaninglessness of the whole discussion, and actually get RFK to respond in a way that he wouldn't have done otherwise, to actually talk about this threat of nuclear war, which, as Irene and Anastasia have mentioned, unites all of humanity at this point. There's no more urgent issue. And what we're doing, uniting all these different peace organizations, regardless of ideological differences, differences in belief, this is what needs to be done. So that's how I would characterize some of the reactions. And that's how I thought about it, because the American University speech is so important today. The Schiller Institute have done multiple, conferences on it. and we need to circulate it. It's so relevant, as RFK said, because you're understanding the enemy. You're not in this comic book depiction of good versus evil, but you're actually putting your foot in the shoe of your adversary. So I would characterize it that way. And in terms of what people have done, can be doing, and what I've done, I'll just say throughout the whole week, basically, I've been out distributing flyers in front of movie theaters across New York City. And the reason I've been doing that is because we just had the new Oppenheimer film released by Christopher Nolan. And it's an incredibly important film. I've seen it twice already. And it really urges people to consider this threat of nuclear war, to consider what Oppenheimer himself released and tragically was unable to remedy due to his own flaws. And the ending is very stark. It's a very stark image. You know, he's talking with Albert Einstein at Princeton University. He's talking about the fact that, you know, there was a potential when the atomic bomb was being tested at Trinity. There was a potential for it to unleash a chain reaction in the atmosphere, potentially igniting it. It was a 2% chance. And though that didn't turn out to be true, obviously, we're still here after the test. Oppenheimer admits, you know, maybe we have set that chain reaction off in a different way, in the forms of arms races, in the form of nuclear proliferation. And now we have enough atomic bombs to destroy the world, you know, 100 times over. We have hydrogen bombs and these other weapons of mass destruction, much more powerful than that used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's important, despite some of the flaws. And we've been talking to people that have been going in to see the movie and that have left it. So, and we've gotten powerful reactions. People say, yeah, you know, this is incredibly scary. So I want to come to your rally. I'm interested in what you're doing. And we've been getting a lot of contacts. So I would say people should be doing that now. And Anastasia already mentioned that you can go on the Humanity for Peace site. That's humanityforpeace.net, I think. The flyer is right on the site. You can print it out and you can go to your local movie theater or go anywhere else and just distribute to people, talk with people, get on the phone and call your friends and family, you know, tell them about this event. And also do circulate it on social media. Jose and I, we've been recording ourselves in front of the theater, just telling people what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be long. It could be, 30 seconds, a minute if it has to. Just go and do that. It'll create a profound effect, I think, if a lot of people start doing this. So, yeah, I'll just end it there.
Okay, well, let's actually show, I think we have a video of some of that action. We can just do that.
Okay, 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay, it's going to be very stretched out, so I'm not as wide as this will make me seem.
Okay, hi everyone. We're out here in front of the AMC theaters with our Humanity for Peace leaflet. We also have a little message in the back for people who are here to see the Oppenheimer film. It's a very good film and I urge everyone to watch it, but what we're doing is we want people who are going to see the film or have seen the film get this leaflet, because that audience of people who actually get something out of the film, which the main message is we shouldn't blow ourselves up, should be coming to the August 6th Humanity for Peace rally. And so we're out here organizing where the people are who are coming to see a politically conscious film about the end of the world through nuclear bombs, which is where we are right now. So please, if you can come to the UN on August 6th, please be sure to do so as we demonstrate to the world we want peace, not destruction.
All right, let me just ask a couple questions, Anastasia, about that day itself and sort of what the plan is. You mentioned when you were talking about various other nations, even where there are different actions being planned. Tell us a bit about that and what the array of intent is.
Well, look, some people on this discussion may be aware on this call today that August 6th is the anniversary of the only nuclear bombings that ever happened in human history. And this was the bombing of Hiroshima, and then 3 days later on Nagasaki. And if you haven't, I actually took a moment the other day to read some of the testimonies of people who survived these nuclear bombings. And I think it's worthwhile for everybody to do that and to really take in what this isn't a regular war. Nuclear war is not a regular war, whatever you want to call it. This is the annihilation of mankind. People were wiped out. They were vaporized. They don't exist anymore. There's nothing left. And the description of some of these people, and my God, I was crying reading some of this stuff. But people describing helping somebody up, and their hand, the skin is peeled off their hand as they were helping them up, or children that were trapped in a bomb shelter because there were so many people trying to get in after the bomb was hit, and the bodies were piled up, and they couldn't escape the bomb shelter for days. They were trapped. All of these it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. War in general is horrific, but this is absolutely unimaginable, to be honest. So when you think about today, just how close we are to nuclear war, where you have officials in the government of the United States, you have elected officials who are saying, we could win a nuclear war against Russia. And they're just flippantly saying things like this. And, for reasonable people like us, which is really the majority of people, right? The mainstream media does not express what the majority of people think. They have a narrative that they're pushing onto other people. They're not expressing what people really think. People look at this and they feel isolated. They feel like there's nothing that they can do, and that's the intention. That's the intention of that whole process, is to push these narratives, push these lines, make you feel like you have no power, make you feel like you can't do anything. And at the time right now when we're facing nuclear war and we don't have an elected official who is explicitly going after this, or if they do, the ADL comes after them, or they get slandered like crazy, or all of a sudden they end up dead. Like I was saying, we have to take on the responsibility of this as people, as the human race. And so what's being expressed at this rally, with all these different speakers that are coming, is one, to honor what had happened, the people who passed away on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the nuclear bombings that happened there. But two, to have this I don't want to just call it anger, but this righteous justice. People need to have this, well up the courage within them to tell the truth and to do what's necessary right now. It's so easy to feel like you can't accomplish anything because it appears that everyone's opinion is crazy. But what we're finding when we're organizing and talking with people, most people don't feel that way. They just need leadership. They need something to be able to express a real thought and what they really want to do. So I'd say that's what we really want to give to people, that you're not alone. You're not isolated. You're not crazy. This is really happening. And there actually is a grouping of people right now who also agree with you. And we're going to stand together. We don't care what walk of life you came from. We're going to stand together and we're going to see this through.
You referenced the business about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I don't know whether people understand 85% of the people that died were civilians. These were not people that were part of any military anything. They were related to people, sure. They were in countries which were at war, but that's who died. And in the case of just Hiroshima itself, of course, everybody did not die right away. They died over time over the effects. But when I say over time, I mean over 60 to 120 days. Yeah, between 90,000 and about 150,000 people that died there, just at one location. And then Nagasaki was something between 60 and 80,000. Many of the deaths were of all kinds, all types. And of course, one of the reasons, what I like about the idea of it being humanity for peace, is that you are memorializing those people. You're not walking away, and you also make sure people want to know about this. That's true. But then the question is, okay, well, what does humanity as a whole do about it? And the idea that humanity as a whole can, because here's what people say: oh, we don't have enough people to do this or that. You don't need that many people. See, what you need is you need a lot of people to be aware that individuals who are completely committed to changing the world and making it better are doing it. And then what happens is they then relate to that. So I know at least one of the things that we've talked about continually about this, Anastasia, is that you can have 2 or 3 people in some country, Malaysia, for example, and if they say, they have a video, let's say, they say, we are humanity for peace. See, now that statement made all over the world, what it does is it makes people aware that something exists called humanity. That's a real existent. That's not an abstraction. That's not people making it up. So, okay, that's just as real as we are. In fact, it may be more real than we are physically. And one of the things I just want to say, which is useful about telling people to park their ideology or park all these other things, they say, oh no, that's a betrayal of my identity. Really? Really? You know, the things you believe, hopefully that is, when you are 13 are not the things that you believe when you were 33. There's a lot of difference, okay? And it's not always better. I didn't say that. But if there's no growth, if there's no change, right, then there's no way that the world gets any better. So I just wanted to reference that, because the idea that, you know, Glenn Greenwald brought up the idea of gerontocracy. Now that's an actual term. It means oligarchy composed of the elderly that will not cede power to anybody else in the society. And, you know, because you would naturally can't accrue more power, quote, the more you know and the more people you know. And that's the idea of it. Well, that doesn't mean that if you are older that you shouldn't be in rulership, but it does mean this: why are you there? You know, what's the reason for it? And it certainly shouldn't be in contradiction to people who are younger or defined by age. That never makes sense. But if you're there, then there must be some kind of process that the society is undergoing to change itself so that these great questions can be discussed by any citizen. And any citizen can do something about them. You know, and so this action that you are talking about, all 3 of you are talking about, I just think has the ability to qualify people. You know, it's like, it's sort of funny. It's a different kind of citizenship. It's not just citizenship of a particular nation, and that's, of course, very important. But it's citizenship all over the world, manifest in different ways in different nations, right? So this, and that may be the way to actually inspire the whole political process to change, and then you get independent movements and tendencies and factions and things, and, you know, what do you think, Irene? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that those are very important points, and I think what this movement is really about, in the most simple terms, is self-awareness of humanity and empowerment of humanity. And I think we have to understand that man has been killing each other since the beginning of time, and we have these innate, depraved, tribalistic tendencies. And so we're trying to educate people and empower people to fight against their tribalistic tendencies. I just honestly don't really believe that people know what it means to be a Democrat or a Republican. I'm not saying that people are ignorant. I'm just saying that we kind of pick our tribe and then we kind of roll with it. But unfortunately, the inadvertent consequences of this good versus evil, us versus them political landscape is causing a profound destruction of the fabric of our society and of the world. And so I really think it's just a matter of simple language, empowerment, and educating people, because people need to realize that all wars are started with myths and misunderstandings propagated by lies of the government and the media. Once you accept that fact, then you can realize that there's no reason for humans to be slaughtering each other on the battlefield. And anyone who tries to tell you that war is good for the economy is lying to you, because we send bombs and destroy lives and kill people overseas for ideas, and it hurts our own economy because the production of these bombs and tanks does not increase our overall economic pie. So it's not good for our country, and it's not good for the country where people are being destroyed through the bombs and the tanks. But the other issue people need to realize is that the only benefactors, again, because all wars are bankers' wars, is the military-industrial complex. And so we need to educate people to understand that they're not really an active participant in the decisions made by politicians to destroy humans in other countries, that we are just being propagandized into this false narrative. So education, empowerment, and self-awareness of the human population, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah. Since Kynan referred earlier to that JFK American University speech, and he had referred to it, of course, in the intervention, we're going to show a short excerpt from that, and then come back to everybody, see if there's anything else that we've left out, any other discussion, and then begin to wind down. So you see a little bit of that.
I have therefore chosen this time and place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds and the truth too rarely perceived, and that is the most important topic on earth: peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. First, examine our attitude towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. So let us persevere. Peace need not be impractical, and war need not be inevitable. By defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we can help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly towards it. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. As Americans, we find communism profoundly repugnant as a negation of personal freedom and dignity. But we can still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. Among the many traits the peoples of our two countries have in common, none is stronger than our mutual abhorrence of war. Almost unique among the major world powers, we have never been at war with each other. And no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
You know, it's worth, by the way, pointing out that when Kennedy gives that speech, he's about 24 years younger than RFK Jr. is now. Just important just to have in mind, right, when we're looking at this entire business. That nation, which was the United States, was a nation in which I was 10 years old when that speech was given. I mainly remember the one he gave the next day because it was about civil rights. Saw that speech. See? And because they didn't show the other speech, it was very difficult to find the other speech, but the civil rights speech was on, so you expected those things from Kennedy. You expected him to respond to what was going on in the country. He was responding at that particular time to Birmingham when all the kids had gone out as a result of Reverend James Bevel and some of his cohorts. They had a bunch of 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds like me out there. And that's how they won what they won in the city of Birmingham. And Kennedy was caused to have to respond to that and other developments. That had just happened in May. So it was a month before he gave this speech. And he gave, in other words, another speech the next day, which was actually if you will, the domestic version of the same thing he was saying in the American University speech. But coming down to back to right now, there's a lot of things people can do, right? We got a week. There's social media things they can do. I mean, literally things like making banners and posters. That's a big job. You know, so I just like, let's start you, Anastasia, if you had particular ideas about that. Because I think we really want to right now kind of lay some of that out for what people and how they can help.
Oh, absolutely. I think we should actually make some signs from our demands. I mean, we have 3 very simple demands to start with, and a 4th one, which is more of a solution, which comes out of discussions with the Global South. And I just want to reiterate something with people. This is an international demonstration, and we're working with nations who are part of the BRICS process, the Global South process of anti-imperialism. We're uniting the peace movement with this anti-imperialist movement happening in the rest of the world, which is very important. But the first 3 demands are very simple. Stop sending money to Ukraine. Immediate peace talks. Dissolve NATO. And the last one is to create a new security architecture, right, where we bring nations together to work out what our actual security concerns are. We have to have this kind of discussion, or else geopolitics is just going to rule everything. The war is never going to stop. It's going to go to Taiwan. It's going to go to Hong Kong. It's going to go somewhere. But anyway, we could make these kinds of posters, I think. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, Kynan, you were talking about the flyers that you had. We should definitely post that one that you guys made on the Oppenheimer flyer. We'll get that up. But we also have other short videos and things that people can help us distribute and get out over social media. You can make your own short video endorsing this rally. We have a few from Colonel Richard Black, myself, Scott Ritter, other people are coming in. Sorry, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but we have more that are coming in, 30-second, 60-second videos, which would really help a lot in shaping the process and getting the word out. So that's what I would say just on that in terms of people getting involved. And if you don't see a sister rally in your area, you just start one. We'll post it on the website, and I'm sure people will join you.
Okay, Irene, anything you want to add to that list of things?
Thank you. So it's humanityforpeace.net, and we also have a Twitter, and Twitter is @forpeacehumanity. You can download flyers from the website. Like Anastasia said, you can submit your own video and you could submit testimony. If you want to have a sister rally, make a sister rally, send it to us, and we'll post it on the website for you. If you need any help, email us and we'll help you with your sister rallies. You can also email us and subscribe so that we can continue to be connected to you. I really like the idea that people can submit the 30 to 60-second videos and we'll post it on the website. You can come to the rally or come to a sister rally, but you can also stay connected to us because this is just the beginning. And remember that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. And anybody can do anything to make the world a better place.
Thanks. Kind, and also there's a concert also that's associated with the rally. Is that right? There's something happening in that evening, I think.
Yeah,
Is there anything
that's
you want
right.
about that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so right after the rally will be from 1 to 4, I believe, in front of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. And at 6 o'clock, we will be having a concert featuring a performance of Mozart's Requiem, which I think is a very good choice, given what you said about actually memorializing, creating a living memorial of the victims from these bombings, and getting people to act. So we'll be featuring that. It will be free for anyone. Pay what you wish, so donations are appreciated, obviously, to fund the venue and everything. And there will also be some selections of African-American spirituals and some other things, I believe, as well. So, yeah, you could see the flyer for that there. People should distribute to that. Oh, yeah, it's a good thing you mentioned that. So besides going to theaters, we've been going to concerts around the city. In Lincoln Center, New York, it's a big venue for concerts and the like. And they do this almost daily. So we've just been going in front of where people are waiting there and just saying, hey, free Mozart concert, performing Mozart's Requiem. So people can do that if they're in touch with musicians, people from choruses. Those are also good people, or just groups, on Facebook, Twitter. I know those are good places to reach out to as well. And also on the rally itself and the concert. There's plenty of places you could go on YouTube, for example, right? People like Jimmy Dore, they stream and they do super chats, right? Where you can just pay $1, literally, to just type in a message. So people can go on those big platforms and say, hey, we're doing this rally August 6th, peace rally. We're getting all these organizations. What do you have to say about that? And there you go. So they could do that on like Jimmy Dore's platform, the Duran, other things that do super chats, similar things. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Okay, very good. So is there anything else? I didn't actually check to see. I don't know if there's any particular questions that have come in. Oh, I think we have one other video we'll show from Diane. I think it's another video that Diane Sayre did. Is that right? If that's the case, why don't you just roll it, and then we'll come back and take some summary remarks from people.
It's Diane Sayre here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where we just had a rally outside of General Dynamics, which is one of the few places producing cluster bombs for the beginning of World War III and potentially the annihilation of the human race if we don't shape up. Now, Scranton was the site of the production of anthracite coal. It was known as Electric City. It's a perfect example of what we actually could be doing if we weren't working so hard to blow up the world. I'm thinking of a verse of Shakespeare, making a famine where abundance lies, because the United States could be a prosperous, happy nation with long life expectancy, with children becoming geniuses, using the resources of our great nation for the general welfare of our people and sharing with the rest of the world. But instead, we are looting our people to destroy the world. So I would urge everybody, join the Schiller Institute, the Libertarian Party, the People's Party, the coalition that is involved in Humanity for Peace. Humanity for Peace is sponsoring a rally at the United Nations on August 6th, 1 p.m. If you're not near the United Nations, hold your own rally. August 6th is the anniversary of the dropping of the nuclear bomb at Hiroshima and then again at Nagasaki. Something totally unnecessary and something which should remind us that nuclear war is not winnable and should never be fought.
Okay, pretty clear. All right, so let's just ask and see if anybody's got anything we haven't said or summary. Let's go to you first of all, Kynan, if there's anything you want to add at this point.
I really have nothing much else to add. People should really take this rally seriously, do whatever they can to promote it. Like I said, distribute flyers at places, make phone calls, because we really are at the precipice of no return. We have a totally decrepit, utterly degenerate administration that's sending billions in arms to Ukraine, showing no signs of stopping, showing no signs of recognizing Russian red lines. So people should take that in. People need to take the gravity of the situation and get off your derriere, as Ray McGovern would say. So, yeah.
Okay, fine. Irene?
I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to come on here and discuss this, and also remind people we actually will have a donate button up sometime today or tomorrow. We have a shoestring budget of about $7,000 to $8,000. Most of it just basic needs to put on a rally. So if people are willing to contribute to help offset the cost of this, it's being born of just the need to pragmatically get this done. So if you have some extra money to donate for this, that would be great.
Yes, very much endorse that idea. I think that's a good idea. So Anastasia?
Yeah, I put actually the link for, because the Schiller Institute is also a fiscal sponsor. I put the link for that in the chat here, which people please do what you can. But I want to address one other thought. If you're, maybe the little voice in your head right now is telling you, oh, this rally isn't going to accomplish anything. Don't you know everybody's so stupid? If these kind of voices are hitting you right now, I'm going to pose a question. Where does real optimism come from? It doesn't come from being hopeful. It doesn't come from blind faith. It comes from you making a personal decision that you're going to act, to do something, to be creative, and to make something new. That's where real optimism comes from. It's that spark of creativity where you say, I see a problem, and I'm going to put everything in my power to figure out how to solve it. And that's where your optimism is going to come from. Make that decision. Make that decision with me, with Irene, with Kynan, with everybody that you know, and just decide that this is what we have to do. It must be done. I don't care what anybody else thinks. It has to happen, and we're going to figure it out. That's what I'll say.
Okay, very good. So Irene Mavrakakis, Anastasia Battle, Kind Thistlewaite, I want to thank you all for being with us today. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank those people that also made the various videos that we showed. And we'll just close today by doing the following. Now, we've essentially been talking all day about the idea of dialogue and the difference between a dialogue with Henry Kissinger, whether he's 49 years old or he's 100 years old, and the dialogue that Kynan carried out with RFK Jr. But there's many different ways in which this is manifested itself. We're going to conclude with a form of a dialogue that was done now over 20 years ago by Lyndon LaRouche, with two individuals from Russia, Sergei Glaziev being one, and the other one being, I believe, Dr. Menshikov. I think it was Vladimir Menshikov. I'm not sure about the first name. And this was at a conference, and he, that is LaRouche, was trying to outline, this was a time where Russia was very troubled. There'd been all kinds of problems economically and so on. They had the war going on with Chechnya that had occurred. And what LaRouche was attempting to do was to outline a conception so big, but at the same time so necessary, that the troubles that were not only plaguing Russia, but the world at that time could be looked at in a completely different way. And so that's what this deals with. And we're going to play this now as our conclusion.
In order to create a great economic boom with some of the same features that were used to rebuild Western Europe in the immediate post-war period, through the various Marshall Plan other programs, through the Kreditanstalt for Wiederaufbau in Germany, for example. That kind of program for a generation of recovery, a generation of progress, a generation of development. And in order to make this work, as has been understood for more than a century, and almost a century and a half now, the only way this could be worked was to develop a system of infrastructural development which would effectively link the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean across Eurasia. Now this is not railroads, this is not Silk Roads, these are corridors of development, corridors which run a range of, say, 100 kilometers in width, up to 100 kilometers, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, going in various directions, north, south, and so forth. Along these routes, as we did in the United States with the Transcontinental Railroad, that the area on either side of the transportation axis becomes immediately in and of itself a sustainable area of economic development. Then by that means you can branch out from the main corridors into subsidiary corridors of development and capture the area. If we make that kind of link, you have one interesting change occurs immediately. For as long as we know, mankind's economy has been dominated by the oceans. Contrary to all these theories that the British biblical archaeologists tell you, civilization did not come from inland and march down the rivers to the seas. It went the other way. Everything we know, especially the information on the internal characteristics of ancient astronomical calendars, shows that these astronomical calendars were predominantly the calendars used by a transoceanic maritime culture functioning a long period of time when most of North Eurasia was under a giant glacier for about 100,000 years. And during that period, most of what became later civilization was running around the oceans. And from the time that these maritime cultures came back into Eurasia, following the melting of the glacier about 20,000 years ago, when that began, was to move inland. And the first directions were to move along the great riverways inland, to move along the coastways close to the seas and close to the maritime traffic. And if you look at the map of the world, you'll find the characteristic of development or non-development is the lack of the ability to utilize efficiently the inland areas, the landlocked areas of the world, with the same degree of efficiency and productivity we can use the coastal areas and the chief riverways. So therefore, if you look in Central Asia, what do you see? You see, here's the heart of it. In China, you have a coastal area of China which reflects this, which is more highly developed, relatively speaking, and inland, the area is poorly developed, the population has a poorer standard of living, poor opportunities for development. This extends then into Central and North Asia as a whole. Therefore, if we conquer this area, what happens? Take a transportation alone. People will think today, who don't think, will think that ocean freight is the cheapest way to move freight. It's not true. The cheapest way to move freight is across land, not by truck. Trucks running up and down the highway tell you that the economy is being mismanaged. Too many trucks. It's not efficient. Costs too much. Intrinsically bad. Railways are much better. Integrated transport systems featuring railways, especially magnetic levitation systems, are excellent. Magnetic levitation systems move passengers more rapidly, but magnetic levitation systems for moving cargo, for freight, that is really a wonder. That's where the payoff comes. If you can move freight from Rotterdam to Tokyo at an average rate of 300 kilometers per hour without much stopping along the way, and if for every 100 kilometers of motion across that route you are generating the creation of wealth through production as a result of the existence of that corridor, then the cost of moving freight from Rotterdam to Tokyo is less than zero and can be up to 200 to 300 kilometers per hour. Now, what ocean freight system can do that? Did you ever see a large supercargo ship producing wealth while it was traveling across the ocean? And at what speed? So therefore, we've come to a turning point in technology, which have emerged over recent periods, where the development of the internal landmass of the world and the great typical frontier is Central and North Asia. It's the greatest opportunity, single opportunity, before all mankind for development. Now this requires some revolutionary changes in the way we think about things. This means that we would be engaged in the greatest change in the environment in the history of mankind. This single project, say a 25-year or more, development of Central and North Asia in this direction, including the conquest of the tundra. The Arctic tundra is one of the great frontiers to be mastered. It can be done. Would mean a great change in the environment. Now, how are we going to decide what is good and bad about changing the environment? Well, what people think today about the environment is pretty stupid. It's wrong, it doesn't make any sense, they don't know what they're talking about. And you see the kind of education you get, it's not no wonder they believe that nonsense. Especially people with physics degrees who don't know which end is up. But the great theory of the environment was established by a Russian of Ukrainian credentials, Vladimir Vernadsky, with his concept of geobiochemistry. See, what you're taught, the problem here is you're taught in most universities and elsewhere about science is nonsense. It's a damn lie, most of it, to put it frankly. What you're taught as basic physics is mostly a lie. Because we know from, as Vernadsky demonstrated this in his own way, and others have known it and shown it, that there are actually three principles involved in man's physical relationship to the earth and the universe. Three categories. One, the category we call non-living processes. What most people who aren't well educated call physical processes. Yeah? The second one, which some people don't understand, those in molecular biology, they refuse to understand it. Yeah? It's called the principle of life. You will never get life out of a non-living process. Life is, as Pasteur insisted, is a principle unto itself. But how it's a universal physical principle, which, as Vanarsky demonstrated with his biogeochemistry, is that the history of Earth is what? The oceans and the atmosphere were produced by living processes. Down several kilometers in the Earth's surface, most of the Earth that we are in touch with as humanity was created as a byproduct of living processes. What Vanarsky calls the natural products of the biosphere. We can measure it. We can measure the power of the biosphere over the non-living process. We can measure it. Living processes are superior to non-living processes. They're more powerful. They're apparently weak, but their long-term effects are more powerful than the short-term effects of the non-living processes. Now there's a third thing, which again Kant won't let you know. Immanuel Kant. That's why they call him Kant, because he can't do anything. If you believe him, you can't do anything either. The essential nature of man is that we are capable of making discoveries of universal physical principle. Discoveries we can validate in known experimental ways. By applying these principles, we increase our power in the universe in ways that can be measured physically per capita and per square kilometer. We can measure this in terms of the demographic effect of this kind of action. That is, does the human species improve its life expectancy, its power to exist in the universe as a result of this? Yes, it does. That's good. Mankind actually is primary mastery of nature has occurred in terms of man's mastery and development of the biosphere. So actually the biosphere is including what we call basic economic infrastructure, such as waterways, power systems, transportation systems. These are part of the development of cities, of good cities at least. These are natural products of cognition which are reflected as improvements in the biosphere. The biosphere is weak. It is stupid. It does not know how to deal with the deserts it has. It does not know how to deal with the tundras. It does not know how to deal with other problems that it has. But we as human beings can come to our poor, stupid slave, the biosphere, and say, we will educate you and we will make you stronger and better. So mankind intervenes in the biosphere to make the biosphere better. And so the principles of discovery, the application or discovery of principles applied to the environment creates the natural products of cognition in the biosphere, which improves the biosphere, which increases the potential for human life. So this is not a mysterious, arbitrary area. This is an area of science. It's an area of scientific precision, which would mean that the job to do is not to say, is it good or bad to tamper with the environment? It's very good to tamper with the environment if you know what you're doing. But you have to develop the science of water management, the science of transportation, the science of reforestation, the science of how to change and control the atmosphere and the climate. You can't make big mistakes. These mistakes will live with you for a quarter century or longer. You can't make big mistakes. Therefore, you have to have competent people, competent groups of people making the determination of how we do this. But by changing the biosphere of Central and North Asia, and changing the biosphere in the arid areas of China and so forth, we will create the greatest boon for humanity in any part of this planet. What we need is a task-oriented mission task force to undertake the policy planning for precisely this, and it must be international.